We are all the inheritors of many legacies in our lives and in this church, especially. Question I'd like to pose to us this morning is what is it that you are going to leave as your legacy in the world? How will the world be different for your having been here? Today, I want to look more closely at the question of what we will leave the world, and especially what kind of a world we want to leave for future generations. Now, as we go into our national and state elections these next couple of weeks, I would challenge you to consider your vote to be one of the legacies that you leave for the world. And I would also challenge you to consider what that legacy will be by reflecting upon what God's vision for the world is, as far as we can discern its traces in the Bible and especially in the revelation of Jesus Christ. So, another way to look at this is to ask, what do you hope the world will look and be like in 50 years? What will you do to see that it becomes that way? Now, unfortunately, Jesus didn't leave behind a particular political plan for us to follow. He left those determinations up to us. But he did leave behind some teachings and ways of looking at the bigger picture to help us figure out how we fit into that bigger picture. So let's look at the two scriptures that we've read this morning. And let's start with the story of the challenge that the Pharisees presented to him concerning the payment of taxes to Caesar. There in Matthew 22. Quick sort of background and recap of the controversy put to Jesus. One of the parties that comes to him are the Herodians. And the Herodians were actually in support of Rome. They were in support of actually setting up the family of Herod as the ruling family, sort of put the family of Herod into power. Now, Herod, of course, was in power. So they were in support of keeping him there, which meant that they, in essence, were supporting Rome's presence. Now, the Pharisees, on the other hand, opposed the tax. They opposed the tax that Rome was imposing. So essentially what was happening here was the Herodians and the Pharisees had gotten together, and though they were rather strange bedfellows, they actually were setting up sort of a trap for Jesus. Because at this point in time, he's actually in Jerusalem. And if he actually starts to speak out against the tax, then there would be grounds to arrest him for inciting a revolution against Rome. So it was a very clever sort of thing they put. Well, so what Jesus does is he asks for a coin. And he asks for a coin that he knows that they are carrying. Now he holds up this coin, and it has an image on it. He asks whose image is on it. They say Caesar's. And he says, give back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and what belongs to God, give to God. In essence, he actually leaves their questions unanswered, and he throws the theological question back upon them, which is basically this: just exactly what belongs to Caesar and what belongs to God? Bill Clenadine responds and explains a little bit about what's going on here. He said, most likely the coin in question bore the image of the Emperor Tiberius, who ruled Rome during those years, about 14 to 37 AD or CE. Now, one side of the coin would have deified Tiberius, as a, quote, son of the divine August, while the other side would have honored him as the Pontifex Maximus, or chief priest of Roman polytheism, which is to say that the two sides of the coin celebrated absolute religious and civil authority for Tiberius. Now, think about the implications of this for a minute. If you believe that there is one God who is supreme, and that you're to love that one God absolutely with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, what did it mean to carry around a coin that said that a human ruler was a god and you owed him your full loyalty? So you can start to understand the full significance of what is being asked here. You know, we're not coins stamped out by some big printing press someplace, but we do bear someone's image. Whose image might that be? Well, Genesis 1:26. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness." Listen again to Jesus' response. "Give therefore to the emperor, Caesar, the things that are the emperor's, Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." So just what is God's? What belongs ultimately to God? Well, to answer that question, let's turn to the second scripture reading for today from Matthew 25. But first, let's consider this from Proverbs 29, verse 18, in the King James Version. "Where there is no vision, the people perish. But the one that keepeth the law, happy is that one." Well, we've been given vision and heart. The vision of God and the heart of Christ. So let's see how this parable that Jesus tells expresses that vision and heart. And we go down to verse 32. And it says, "All the nations will be gathered before him as the Son of Man comes." Now, the Greek for nations is ethnoi, meaning literally the peoples. And it's a collective word. It's not groups of individuals, but it's as a body of people. Okay? An ethnos is a body of people, a group. Now, we can consider it as a body politic, or as a culture, or a society. What this establishes is that this is not a teaching about individual actions in the world. It's about what we do as a society, as a nation, as a gathering of nations. And so this is what he's looking at. Gatherings of people. What is it that you're doing as a gathering of people, as a society? Well, what are the criteria then for this judgment that's going to occur? He says it very simply, twice actually. "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me." These are the criteria that are being looked at. Now, what's interesting in this passage is that nowhere does he say anything about the content of our faith. What a nation does for or to the least among its members is what the Son of Man will judge. Not its glories or crowning achievements, not its great literary output, nor its gross national product, nor even its technological prowess. How it has fed those who are hungry, how it has treated those in prison, how it has provided clothing for its poor, how it has treated those who are foreign or alien or immigrants, or how it provides health care to its inhabitants. The criteria here are unequivocal. You can't get around what Jesus is saying here. Let me tell you what I've experienced over the years. When I share this scripture and preach about it, I often get complaints from people that I'm getting political and that I need to observe separation of church and state. But we need to be clear about what is overtly political and what is clearly social. Politics has to do with how we utilize the systems of government that we have set in place to order our society, to maintain a common defense, and to provide for the general welfare. Does that sound familiar? Those are the phrases derived from the preamble to the Constitution. That's politics proper. Now, Jesus didn't leave behind any political program or instructions about how the world was to be governed, how people were to be fed, how they were to be clothed. He just said, hey, this is what the criteria are all about. These are God's priorities. That's left up to us how we do it. And humans have stumbled and bumbled along and will continue to stumble and bumble. But what Jesus did leave was the vision of how God looks at things. The Bible is also unequivocal in saying time and time again that how a society treats its poor and most vulnerable members is of grave concern to God. That is social. We as Christians must engage our social world. That's who Jesus engaged. The society of his time, the people. That's the Bible. That's the teaching and example of Jesus. To put it another way, how the poor, the vulnerable, and the powerless are treated by those who control the wealth and have power over other people's lives is a direct reflection upon the spiritual state of affairs of that people. At another point, Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. That's Matthew 7:21. The kingdom of heaven is not about saying with our lips that we believe in Jesus or mouthing pious phrases. It's about doing the will of God. It's about looking at the world from the standpoint of God and then acting accordingly. So what can we as citizens and as Christians do? Well, first off, we can study carefully the issues and consider the implications of what people propose to do who are running for office or the rhetoric they espouse. We can vote responsibly, remembering how we affect the lives of people all across the globe. Don't vote just for the self-interest of a small group of people, but vote on behalf of all persons. In other words, what will bring the most benefit physically, emotionally, to the most people? What will bring true security for all people? Safety, health. Write letters. Encourage friends to vote. You can also study the social principles of the United Methodist Church as a guide. You can find these online by going to umc.org and clicking on the link to Social Principles. Reflect upon these statements and see what light they might shed upon our society and the decisions we are needing to make. So finally, where I began, what do you hope the world will look and be like in 50 years? What will you do to see that it becomes that way? We know the priorities of Jesus. How will those priorities guide our decisions? Amen.